We welcome Sister Norma Pimentel, our guest speaker today. Norma is a sister with the Missionaries of Jesus. As Executive Director of Catholic Charities at the Rio Grande Valley, Sister Norma oversees the humanitarian respite center in McAllen, Texas, where crowds of immigrants stop daily after crossing the border. I could tell you of Sister Norma's accomplishments and credentials, but you could easily forget those. I'd rather tell you that Pope Francis loves Sister Norma, and we're going to love her too. Hers is the work of restoring human dignity at the respite center and at the borders. Sister Norma doesn't count hours at the border work. It's her life, and it has been for 35 years. Her work, her mission, her ministry is to restore human dignity to the immigrant population.
Thank you, sister. Muchas gracias. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. My throat is not working very well, so bear with me. I don't know, I can't kick this throat problem. We've been there with a couple of weeks. But anyway, a lot of other people that come volunteer go through the same thing, you know, and so I can bear with it. So, muchas gracias. Thank you for inviting me and for joining me, because as in my book, you're all champions in this world of today, doing a big difference in our communities to make a difference, to save lives and to be present and be merciful, right? Mercy is definitely something that we need in our world today. The way things are today, mercy is what we need. And you definitely have shown that that is something that we must do. So let me share a little bit about who I am, for those that don't know who I am. I come from Rio Grande Valley, South Texas, right at the bottom of the border, right with Mexico. I shared once in a book that I was asked to be part of by the Holy Father, where I had to share a bit about myself. And I say that I was born in the United States by chiripa, that means by chance, because my father decided he wanted to come to the United States back right before I was born. And he just came to ask at the border, what do I need to do to live in this country? And they gave him an application. And he said, fill this out. So he filled it out. He was coming with my mom, pregnant with me, and my sister, who's 2 years older than I am. And he filled it out. And then they said, okay, well, I'll come back whenever you have a response from me. And they said, no, you can't go back. You have to stay until we give you a response. So he wasn't ready for that. He just came with nothing, just walked across to the United States and applied. And so he was forced to stay. And when he was forced to stay, he had to put up my mom and Melissa to somewhere and go find a job. And I was born a couple of days after that. So I'm a U.S. citizen by chance, If given a choice, I don't know. I love both countries. I grew up in both countries, back and forth. It was so common to just go back and forth. We buy tortillas in Matamoros, and we go to H-E-B to get groceries and things like that in the United States. It was a back and forth kind of thing. We have families on both sides. The border has always been a beautiful place where two countries come together and merge, and there's no difference, We always had no problems up until we started seeing walls go up, and things started to change. So growing up in the United States, in Brownsville, I joined the Missionaries of Jesus. It's a group of sisters that came from Spain. They came from Madrid because our local bishop asked the Sisters of Missionaries of Jesus from Spain if they could come to his diocese. So they did. Once in the diocese, they separated from the house in Spain, mostly because it was so difficult to be governed by someone so far away. And the customs and the culture and the new native sisters joining them, like me, were so different and so hard to be able to manage and under that supervision from Spain. So this is a group of sisters I joined. Right from day one, the sisters were very involved with the immigrants, because back then there were not any detention facilities or anything for women and children. They only had 31 facility for old, just for men. And so the sisters would always get a call, day or night, and ask them, sisters, can you take this mom and these kids in your convent, because so you can take care of them. And so right from day one, my introduction to immigrant community was there. I lived, and they were part of who we were as sisters, and we would help them to their point where they would go beyond that, when being there in the border to wherever they were going. So very early on, our bishop actually asked the Missionaries of Jesus to oversee a house, a refugee shelter. People that were coming into the country back in the 80s when we had war with El Salvador, and some of you may remember that during Oscar Romero's time, and Nicaragua as well, Somoza and all the Sandinistas and all of that. So we had hundreds and hundreds of people coming to the United States, and as soon as they crossed the river, they ended up at Casa Oscar Romero, and the sisters were overseeing that house. So I was there, living there with Sister Juliana for 10 years, overseeing that shelter. At the same time, I was working in the diocese for the different offices, Office of Catechesis, but I lived there at the shelter. While I was there, I was introduced by Sister Juliana, who was the sister, my mentor. She was from Spain, and she guided me to understand what God was calling me to be. I was a very young sister and was open to learn and to understand life. So she taught me very well. Early on, I remember we were at Casa Romero, and she asked me, we were going for lunch one day, and on the way for lunch, she said, Norma, there's a group of people at our congressman's office, and they're there defending the people we are helping. We know exactly what's going on in El Salvador because we hear their stories, all the tragic realities and the tortures and everything they go through. We see them daily arrive at our house, and we're helping them. And so the United States is sending $1 million a day to support these wars in El Salvador, and you may have heard of that. And so this group of people were there praying and singing and asking the congressman, why are you voting in favor of this? So the sister said, vamos, let's go show our support, They were gonna do civil disobedience. You heard about that, right? Well, I learned that day. I didn't understand all those things that were happening, but at that day, this group of people were going to stay at 5 and not leave until they were arrested, to make a point and say, what you're doing is wrong. Something similar to what happened just recently, right? In DC with many other sisters, right? Well, I learned that very young on. And so what happened was that right at noon, when we were there to show our support, the man of the building decided to call the cops, And he said, you know what, all of you leave from here, or you will be arrested. So sure enough, the cops came and started to arrest everybody. So Sister Juliana looks at me and she says, Norma, she said, when you believe in something and you run away when things get tough, then you don't stand for nothing. You're nobody. So you need to decide. We can't both get arrested, because somebody has to run the house, shelter. So she tells me, you decide. So here I am, 24, 25 years old, and she's 50 something, and she really let me decide, you know? And I looked at her and I said, I guess it's me, right? And so she said, okay, bye. Then she takes off. Boy, was that a lesson for me to learn. I was confronted with a sense of, who am I? You know, I had to make a decision in my life. What do I stand for? You know, this getting arrested was not something that I was ever taught to do, you know? So I learned and I saw that moment as a very defining moment in my life. Defining moments that actually tells us who we are. You know, what are we made of? Are we willing to take that step forward and do something that may disrupt your life completely, you know? And I did. It was not an easy thing to do, to get handcuffed, to get mugged, to get put in a cell, and to try to make sense of everything, of what's happening, and why. We all have those moments, and I think it's important that we don't miss those moments that define who we are. Because we're called to make a difference in the life of others. Only because God has called us to be who we are. That's why we decided to leave everything, you know? We changed everything. I remember in Casa Romero, I had to buy a Xerox machine once because we were filling out asylum papers. Man, we filled out thousands of asylum papers back then. And then I needed a Xerox machine. So I called this lady and I asked her, I want to buy this Xerox machine from you because I need to make copies. And so she brings the machine and she says, sister, I'm going to sell you my Xerox machine because I'm a businesswoman, but I am 100% against what you're doing here, helping these illegal aliens, you know? And so I said, thank you. Thank you for letting me know why, what you think. Let me show you what I do and why. So I showed her the place. I introduced her to the families and the children and explained why they were there. When we got back to the office, she tells me, sister, I am 100% in favor of what you're doing. 100%. I don't know what you're doing here. You're wasting your talent. You know? You're so gifted. I mean, you're the best salesperson I ever met. You could be making millions somewhere else, and you're here, you know? And I said, this is where God wants me to be. Who I am and who I came to be in this world is what God wants of me. And so I'm listening to Him. And I think you all have too. That's why you're here. So today, we have a situation at the border. Again, we start to see a lot of children. Sister Juliana passed away 4 years ago. 5 years ago, actually. Right before she passed, she was there when we started again to receive hundreds of families. And she came with me to the bus station the very first day that I went to see the hundreds of families that were there. Border Patrol was allowing them to continue and to stay in the United States until they went before an immigration judge and determine whether they had credible fear for their life and they can request asylum. So in the meantime, they were dropped off at the bus station with no sense of what to do. There were families, dirty, muddy, hungry, scared, crying, children, infants dehydrated. It was a mess. There were hundreds of them right there at the bus station with not knowing what to do. So the community came together, took my lead to organize that response, and we took them to Sacred Heart, a parish hall that I borrowed for a couple of days, not knowing that it was going to be a couple of years later and I'm still there. But we responded and we helped. And Sister Juliana said, Norma, it's the same as Casa Romero, only today it's children. It's children, so many of so sad to see kids, little ones, hurting. I always share this story of very impactful for me right from the beginning when I started back then, those days in 2014. My experience going to the detention facility. The kids were kept in detention because the United States Border Patrol, their hands were tied. They had no choice but to keep them in detention in this facility that was so small. The capacity for that place was only 300 and they had clearly over 1,000. And mostly all of them children. Little ones, 5, 10 years old at the most. The parents, the kids with parents, family units, that's what they call, were the ones that were dropped off the bus station. Because they needed to make space for the kids. Because the United States proceeds to take care of the kids that are unaccompanied in a different way to protect them from human trafficking. But they kept them in some conditions that were just not okay. They had no choice until they can put up a building up to code to care for those kids. So in the meantime, what they had was not up to code. It was so sad to see the children. Detention facilities filled with kids, dirty, muddy, crying, asking for help. And when I walk in there and I see them and I ask to pray with them, they give me permission. How can they say no to a nun that wants to pray, right? So I got to go in. But it was the most hardest things I ever done in my life. You never forget those kids. It's a reminder for me in what I do today, in what I have done, to help these kids, to help these families. Because it is rightfully theirs to be in a country, to be in a place where it's safe, to stand up for them, to speak for them, to defend them. These children were all around me, pulling my dress, asking, por favor, ayúdame, please help me. Sácame de aquí. No puedo respirar. It was so tight and difficult. So they could not even breathe. I remember one kid telling me how they would rest, take turns resting, because they could not even sit down. And we prayed together. Diosito, ayúdanos. Please help us, God. And the officer tells me when I walk out of there, they were also at the verge of tears. Just looking at all of us praying and crying. And the officer tells me, he says, "Sister, thank you. You helped us realize that they're human beings." Sometimes we allow ourselves to be hardened because we're doing our job. And we're told not to look at them as people. And that's what happens. This country of ours is divided. Divided, all thinking we're doing the right thing. That it's okay to send them back. It's okay not to feel anything towards them because they're not humans, you know? They must not be. But when you see them crying, and when you hear them praying, you know there's a God. And you know there's something wrong. When you have children before you suffering like that. And it's not okay. And it's all our responsibility that they're there. That we cannot offer them something better. It's not only our policymakers and people in the administration. It is our United States. We haven't done enough to hold them accountable. To make sure that our country is governed by laws that respect all life. We have failed those children. And we continue to do so when we see them separated. When we see them that the only solution that the United States has to resolve and to make sure that things are done right, that they are deterred from coming because we don't want them here, that we can be okay with separating them without even knowing if they will ever see their parent again. When I saw children come together when they were reunited, because thank God some of them were, and we received hundreds of them when they just for the very first time saw mom or dad again. And I remember this little girl as I was walking, it was late at night, and this little girl was holding my hand, and we were walking to a room where they were going to spend the night. And she looks up and she says, "Today, hoy no voy a llorar." ¿Por qué, amiguita? Why are you not going to cry today? Because I've cried every single day for the past month since I was separated from my mom. Every night I cried. And tonight I'm sleeping with my mother. To hear that and to know that there are many others that have been separated and they are still crying. Because there's no way we will ever know how to reunite them. It is sad that this is happening today in our time, in our country. And we can go to bed. Sometimes I have a difficult time when in our center, we have hundreds and hundreds of people that arrive daily. Up until just this week, we were seeing close to 1,000 immigrants a day. 1,000. Talk about shoelaces in one day. I need 1,000. Today, the numbers have dropped because of the new policy of remaining Mexico, which is really working for those who implemented it. They're having people come desperately to our border, leaving the circumstances they're faced with back home, fleeing a situation that is very scary for them, and they share their stories, how bad it is. And they arrive to our border with a hope that they can be in this country safe. And they're told, you need to stay in Mexico and wait for our answer. So they send them back. That's the remaining Mexico policy. And he just got it implemented. So they turn back to Mexico, where they're exposed to a lot of crime. The organized crime is right there, ready to take them, to use them, to exploit them, to take their kids if possible. We heard recently in the news and the picture, the tragic reality of this dad with a little girl who passed away in the river. This father was there with his wife and the child. And they wanted to come through the point of entry, through the bridge. But the organized crime told Mexican immigration, right at the border, the United States gives a number. You want to cross into the United States, you have to take your turn. So they give numbers. And they're up to number 800 and some, because they only allow maybe 5 a day or a week to cross over. Anything to make you desperate to say, this is not something you want to do. They don't make it that very easy to just cross, do it the right way, the legal way. So this father and mother and child were asked by the organized crime, you have to give us 500-ish for each of you, and 300 for your daughter, in order to get that number. See how we participate and allow crime to happen because of our ways of holding back and doing things that contribute to the pain and suffering of these families that are simply trying to have a chance to life. So they got desperate. And so we know the tragic reality of this family. They drowned. It is sad to see this reality and how it continues to be something that doesn't get any better, but it gets more and more people hurting and people suffering. So we're there at the border. Thanks to the generosity and help of so many, we have continued to help to this day, way over 160,000 immigrants since that first day we started and opened the doors of our humanitarian respite center. Lots and lots of families. And all because of the generosity and care and compassion of hundreds and hundreds of people like yourself and others who have come to the border to say, I want to help. And we are helping. And we're trying to do our best to be there for these families. That sometimes when as I was saying, before going home to sleep, I like to stop by the respite center and just visit with the families that are resting. The families are with us just for one day. And we help them try to connect with their family so they can go on to go wherever they're going. In the meantime, they have a chance to take a shower, eat, get a clean set of clothing, see a doctor, get shoelaces, get milk, get things like that, hygiene items. And if they can't leave that same night because the bus doesn't leave until the following day, they sleep there. So we pick up everything, take everything from the floor, clean and mop and set some mats down, and they go to sleep. So I have a chance to be with them and maybe pray for the night's over, encourage them. And so we hear like all of them asking me, my throat hurts. Can you have some medicine for me? You know, so I become an instant nurse for that moment. You know? So I'm going to give you this magic liquid. It's NyQuil. You know? They don't know that. You know? Whoever wants it, everybody raises their hand. And so I have little cups and say, okay, I'm going to give you this. But remember, you don't wake up in the morning. It's not my fault. Okay? And a little kid comes up to me and pulls my dress. He must have been 3 or 4 years old. He said, hermana, no tiene un pantaloncito limpio. El mío está orinado. You have a little pair of pants for me? The one I have on is pee. And I want to change. Or we have a dad that just arrived and it's 10 o'clock. The last group may be arriving that late. And everything's closed for the day. My volunteers are all gone. Staff is gone. And so we say, close shop up, and tomorrow morning we'll make sure you get the help you need. This father comes to you, and this, I have this, one of the volunteers is visiting from Spain and helping us out. He said, oh, sister, you know, how can you say no to this dad? He starts to cry and says, can you at least give something to my son who is dirty? And we've been with those clothes for way over a month. Can you please give me something so he can at least go to sleep with something clean? And so how can you say no to them? You know, if you go, it's hard to leave. You know, you work hours and hours and hours. I have volunteers they come from up north, and they like winter Texans we call them, and they discover the respite center, and that's where they end up every day, working up to 12, 14 hours. And I go home, rest. I can't, sister. How can you leave them? There's always one more that says, por favor, can you help me? So that's what we're doing at the border. Helping and being there present, making people realize that there's people in this world that cares about what they're going through. I remember back in 2014, the city of McAllen came over at we were at Sacred Heart Parish Hall, and it was one of the very first day when we started, and it was an instant where we had people hundreds of them in a parish hall like this big, maybe. And we had hundreds of refugees. We also had hundreds of volunteers and mountains of donations. And everybody was doing something. It was chaos. But I call it holy chaos because something good was really happening, you know? And so he asked me, "Sister, what are you doing here?" And I said, I looked back and I saw what I was seeing. I saw something so beautiful happening at that parish hall. Turned back and I looked at him and I said, "Restoring human dignity, that's what we're doing." He definitely took a step back. He didn't expect my answer. And he turns back and says to me, "Sister, if I have a magic wand, what would that magic wand do for you?" Well, we had our parish hall with no showers, and I said, "Showers, you know?" Sure enough, that evening we got a mobile unit of 8 showers, you know? And the next day we had the whole city support with mobile tents, a mobile clinic, an extra pair of showers, everything. The whole city was 100% there with us, helping in anything we needed. It was amazing how we, the community, came together. It was not just the Catholics, it was everybody. I remember one time there was a radio show outside interviewing me, and with calls coming in to ask questions about what's happening with the whole respite center there in McAllen. Somebody calls and says, "Sister, I'm Catholic, but after hearing what you're doing, I'm deciding I'm not going to be Catholic anymore." And I said, "Mijito, I don't know what you're going to be, because I have Presbyterians and Lutherans and Jewish, and you name them, they're all here, so you're out with nobody there." We're all here. We're all one church. Evangelicals and you name it. We all came together as one church. It didn't matter who we were, whether we were Catholic or United Methodist or whoever. It was us together as one church that believed in one God, who were present to a people who were suffering, and we were there. And it was beautiful to see that it didn't matter who we were, whether you were Republican or Democrat, how old you were. What mattered was that you were there, present, to a reality that we see before us, that we were recognizing that He was there, that we needed to be. And people gave up themselves unconditionally, without pay, for hours and hours, present, doing something that made a difference in the lives of so many